Yo, I can see that podcast back again. Derek, Preston, Matt, we're all on here. We're going to look forward, look back slightly. Before we look forward, I'm tossing the ball to Matt. Matt, catch us up on all the action from that Armwood and Tampa Tech game last week.
Man, that was probably one of the hypest games I think I've ever seen. It always is a big game, but it just seemed like last week uh, was just it was crazy. There was the fans. There was a ton of fans out there. The game was actually sold out. Um, a lot of great players, D1 athletes. You had Dallas Wilson committed to Oregon. You had Gerard Pringle Armwood committed to University of Miami, and Jalen Waters, he's committed to Florida. I mean, so a lot of big time athletes out there. Tyler Williams committed to Georgia. I mean, it was great. The pregame was probably one of the best. There was about 10 media guys out there. We were just talking about how hyped it was. I mean, they were looking at each other, just like throwing up like you know, the, you know, and then like the phrase of the game was bully down, bully versus bully. And it was wild, man. It was probably definitely one of the best games I've seen in a long time. It went all the way down to the fourth quarter, and Tech actually was winning, and Armwood was able to hold off and get back and get that last touchdown. They made it a 4-point game and ended up winning the game.
I just ran through just some stats while you were talking, and it looked like it was a ground and pound type game. Both running backs for both teams looked like they had a pretty good outing. Was that how it went?
Yeah, that's one thing about Pringle. He is very consistent, and as crazy as it sounds, one of the first times I saw Pringle playing was at the Tech game 4 years ago, and he scored a touchdown that game as well. So it's pretty cool to see him evolve into the player that he's become. It was huge. I think last week we talked about what was going to win the game was the trenches, and yeah, that definitely played a big impact. The second part of it, which me and the media guys were talking about it and kind of laughing about, was the cornerbacks, man. Like that made a big impact because you had such great receivers, and both sides of the ball really shut the receivers down pretty solid. You didn't see any really big plays from Dallas. He had a nice, good run. And then Tyler Williams actually had a touchdown, but they called it back. So that was a really big play out of him. You really, it became that ground and pound, is like you're saying, Pringle. And then number 12 on Tech, he had a huge run. It was like 80 yards touchdown. I mean, that was a really great play with him as well.
It looked like you were saying, it was a ground game. Neither quarterback looked like they really got off much, and that goes along to say what you're talking about with how well the corners were playing. And then just looking at the numbers, both quarterbacks were involved pretty heavily in the run game, which added to the run totals. Looked like Armwood in total had 156 rushing yards. Pringle with the bulk of that with 119 on 24 carries. And then Tampa Tech, Javari Barnett with 129 rushing yards of Tampa Tech's 260. So it looked like it was definitely a credit to the offensive lines, credit to those running backs, and the quarterbacks who were involved in that running game. But that goes to what you're saying, backing up that it was a ground and pound game. No,
those running backs, they did their thing. Though I think the only downfall that Tech had was the turnovers. They had 3 interceptions. They had, I think, 2 fumbles. The last, Alontae Dean had a big interception at the end of the game, and that's what turned it over to Armwood for them, able to march down and score. So, I think if Tech would have kind of held on to the ball a little bit better and didn't have all the turnovers, could have went the other way. Really good. Both teams just look incredible, man. It's like watching 2 little mini colleges out there, man. They are just awesome. Great group of guys on both teams.
Hey, and guess what? Tech's got the next 2 weeks. Plant and Gaither, and a Plant team that's ready to prove themselves in it. Yeah, so man, this Tech team, I mean, they're 1-2 right now with a loss against Venice and Armwood, 2 of the top teams in the entire state. I'm telling you right now, this team could go to the middle of the season with a 2-3 record, 1-4. And I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't want to tangle with Tech at all. They're a big time program, and they've got 2 tough games still, just right back to back right now, following Armwood. And so it'll be interesting to see how they respond. But yeah, just such a big time program sitting there. We knew that would be a battle, and look at what Venice is doing down south. I mean, they're just such a powerhouse. But yeah, we got Plant against Tech coming up, and then follow that by Tech against Gaither. So it's a tough little stretch opening up for Tech. So we'll see what happens with it.
And then it tapers off. Winning cures all. So all schedules are not made equally. So you're looking at a Tech team with a 1-2 record. However, that's very deceiving because of the teams that they play, Dave, right? And then once they'll play Plant, if Plant's at full strength, that's going to be a good game. And then you're looking at that Gaither game. It's really going to tell which team is which, Gaither and or Tampa Tech. And then Tech schedule really kind of tapers off, which is good for them before they hit a playoff run. So I'm really looking forward to Tech's next 2 weeks versus a very well-coached Plant team. And obviously we'll see their full strength. And then a Gaither team that played Tech well last season in the third and fourth quarter. And if Gaither can kind of keep their emotion in check and keep those yellow flags off the ground from the officials, it should be a good game also. The common denominator, common opponent between Tech and Gaither is going to be Armwood. And that Armwood game for I would say 3 quarters, the Gaither Armwood game to start the season was better than the score indicated.
I agree. That Gaither Armwood game, it was that first half, it was neck and neck, and then Armwood pulled off in that second half. Gaither, they just played Durant this past Friday, went overtime, and Gaither won by a field goal. Durant has to head over to Armwood this week. It's going to be another Armwood home game, and Armwood's really got something cooking over when they have the home games. I mean, I know Coach Evan, he's been putting a lot of thought into it. They have the big run-through tunnel. They have their band out there. They have all their cheerleaders. I mean, they do a big pregame. It is exciting. So if you guys are going to any of those games, make sure you get there early and check it out, just because it's like watching a mini college over there, so it's exciting.
Matt, not necessarily break the big news, but go ahead and start us off with the big news that hit Tampa Bay high school football earlier this week.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We got some news that James Wilder was let go by Chamberlain, and their assistant coach stepped up. We heard, about this a few weeks ago. James stepped back to be the GM, and the assistant coach became the head coach. But then I'm not really sure 100% what happened, but they officially let him go completely. So it's definitely, I hate to hear that, because firsthand, I actually sent my son to James's summer camp this past summer. So I got to talk to James a lot, and his motivation to help the kids in the school. His energy is very high. He's just a great guy in general. I really, really like James as a person, as a coach. Definitely somebody that I send my kid to mentor, and so I hate to hear that for him, because I know like the passion that he put in there and the work. I mean, and it's a volunteer thing, so he was there about 275 days, I believe is what he said, and just to let him go like that, politics you're pretty big in high school. I don't know exactly what happened. I'm sure there's things that we just didn't hear about, but I just wish the best for James. He's a great guy, great coach. I hope that he can bounce back, and maybe get with another program and keep it going. And, good luck to Chamberlain. Hopefully they can continue with their success. I just think that the energy that he brought to the table, it made the kids want to go. He had transfers come in. He had a ton of people sponsoring and donating. And, oh, man. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen, how that's going to unscramble.
Yeah, I reached out to James. And James, you are more than welcome to call in, jump in on the podcast. We can do a separate show, man, anytime you want. So you have an open invitation. Yeah, so let's keep kind of moving right along. Derek with quick cut. Hey, Matt, matter of fact, you take the lead on this, bro. Like toss Derek to rock.
Derek, man. So last week you watched a ton of film. You watched film every week, which I love. And you talked about Leonard a little bit last week. So is there any teams that you thought maybe like stood out to you on film this past week?
Well, yeah, I got to look at Strawberry Crest. Broke down their season so far, and just they're doing some good things this year. They've got a wide receiver over there for the 25 class, real good size, 6'1", 6', 6'1". But man, he's had a heck of a season so far. Preston, did you have some numbers on him? What he's done? I'm not. Yep. Yeah, I mean, this kid's been returning kicks, catch and run, deep threat kind of kid. Just having a great year so far. They've got a few weapons in that wide receiver unit and the quarterbacks, getting the ball to them, and so they've had an effective season. Cam Eckert at the tackle spot, real good offensive lineman. And they're just doing really well on offense. Defense, they got a two pair of cornerbacks over there. They got a 26. I think he's a 26 cornerback too. That's making some real nice plays in the secondary. We're going to be featuring his film on the on Big County's Twitter. But yeah, they're just doing some good things. They got a pair of defensive linemen, number 56, number 53. Also comes off the edge, gets in the backfield, so they can get after the quarterback a little bit. They got number 4, 22, 10, I believe, a linebacker, making a lot of plays. So they've had a really good year this year. I'm very interested to see what they do down the road. But yeah, the wide receiver, get a look at. We've been featuring the Strawberry Crest videos on the Big County Twitter. So that was kind of the team I looked at over the last few days, and there'll be more to come. But that was one of them. But yeah, Preston, what do we got on numbers on him? What has he done?
So the young man's name is Calvin Francis, jersey number 17. And let me just spit some of these numbers out for a Strawberry Crest team that often gets overlooked. One of the newer schools in the area. I believe it may be 20 years old, if that. All right. But this young man right now, 4 touchdowns on the season. He had 2 against Brandon in the 20. And note, Strawberry Crest is 3-0 currently. Let's start there. So Strawberry Crest still undefeated. All right. He's got 4 touchdowns, 4 receiving touchdowns. He's averaging about 40 yards receiving each game. All-purpose yards, he is 49, 48. So he's at 266 all-purpose yards on the season.
And they
total of 24 touchdown points of his 4 TDs. He's a good looking kid, man. Again, head to the Big County Preps Twitter page. You'll see him. His name is Calvin Francis. Beautiful kid, man, and he's really kind of twitchy. Got great inline speed. I like him a lot. He's a good find, Derek. That's a good find.
They play Alonzo next week. That's going to be a nice game. And then they got Robinson. So yeah, they're 3-0. They open up with a big one against East Bay. They beat Middleton and Brandon. And Brandon, even though they beat Brandon they're playing at a high energy level. Coach has got some good things going on over at Brandon, so they're playing with a lot of energy. Saw a lot of kids pop up on film at Brandon as well. But yeah, they have Alonzo coming up this Friday, so that's going to be a real nice game. I'll have a chance to break that down, but yeah, that's going to be a nice little matchup right there with Alonzo.
Yeah, that's a great matchup. We know Alonzo; they've been doing really well this year as well. I want to say they're 2-1 if I'm not mistaken, and They have a great little team out there. I talked to the head coach a couple weeks ago, and he's super proud of the team, so that's going to be a very competitive game. So Strawberry Crest versus Alonzo this Friday. Definitely going to check that out. Check the film out. There'll be plenty of highlights for that as well.
Yep.
Hey, if you're a coaching staff and you take on a job like Alonzo and Leonard and Strawberry Crest and Chamberlain and Brandon, those jobs that aren't truly sexy jobs, and they're not going to bring in a whole lot of talent year in, year out, and you're starting to turn that tide, if you will, to have an above 500 team each year. Like, think about this. Like Alonzo, we've been doing this podcast now for 2 seasons. We've talked about Alonzo as much as we've talked about Tech and Armwood because of the job that coaching staff is doing at Alonzo. And they're becoming consistent with putting wins on the board. And now we've talked about Brandon who I don't know if they even won a game last year. Maybe they had 2 wins or something. They weren't very good last year. We've shouted out Brandon 3 or 4 times now within the last 3 or 4 weeks. And we've also, hey, we're excited about Leonard. Freaking Strawberry Crest is 3-0. They got a prospect over there that could be a high major D1 player. So you take on these type of jobs, and going back to Chamberlain. Chamberlain has had 6 different head coaches since Billy Turner in 2008. And that's just bananas. These jobs aren't the sexiest of jobs, but you take this on with a goal, an aspiration, and now these teams are becoming more and more relevant because of what these coaches are doing. They're getting these kids dialed in and motivated.
Yep. And Jefferson also had that big win too. I know we're talking Jefferson's 3-0. Palmetto, we talked about them last week. They're 3-0. They beat a Sarasota Riverview team. And so, yeah, it's there's a lot of good things going on locally. But, yep.
And just to keep it going, and not to really talk about it too much, but so what's your thoughts about JV football? You know, a lot of kids, they kind of have this this attitude of like, that's not for them. They're too good for it. What do you think about it? And then I'll tell you my opinion on it.
I think JV football is the most needed brand of football that any area could have. It is your ultimate selfish feeder program. It's the building block to your team. It's the training ground that's needed. And if you don't have, let's start with a staff. If you don't have a dedicated staff in your JV program, then your varsity program is probably going to reflect that. All right. You have to grow your team. It's kind of like in an NFL team. You don't build your NFL team off of free agents. You build your NFL team through the draft. You bring in your own players for that for the culture that you want in your team that can fit the system that you run. So with what you saying, Matt, I can see it. We're all high school kids one day. Back in the day, you know that the kids, they ridicule each other for not being on varsity and this, that, and other. However, it's better to be on JV where you're learning how to play, hopefully in the same type of system that your varsity plays, and you're actually gaining football experience than sitting on the bench, right? So you spend your 1, maybe 2 years on JV. You bring those kids now grow up together. And now when it's their time to play as varsity players, sophomore, junior, senior year, now you've got a culture of kids who have playing experience, and you just insert and play. I'm very, very passionate about the JV system. And this sparks on another conversation we probably need to come up with another time, is the feeder systems from the youth program to the JV program to the varsity program. And obviously, I'm not going to get on my high horse about that. I'm going to toss it back to you two. Matt, it looks like you want to get a comment about a JV, man. Please rock out.
Yeah, no, I got a whole new respect for JV. Last year, I was hired to do some video for a kid on East Bay, and they played Leonard. And Leonard, I was blown away, like how great both teams looked. But what I really thought was great was there's a lot of young kids, you know, 9th grade getting able to shine, you know, at a young age and do their thing, you know, and I think it's just great to get that experience and get the high school level experience. Like you said, like they're going to get the playing time, get the touches on the ball. They're going to get used to playing with their quarterbacks, and then they all kind of grow together. If they, you know, hopefully they stick to that school. But it's no wonder Leonard is doing so well. You know, they had such a good little program over there, so they're able to grow those kids up, and then now they're all balling in varsity. So definitely, I know, like, any kids that are watching, make sure you go play your JV, especially your freshman and your sophomore year. And if you're really, really good after I think there's 6 games, they're going to step you up to varsity anyways. But go get that playing time in, and don't feel like just because you play JV, you know, you're not like as good as, you know, the other players. But it's going to give you a lot of experience in playing high school football. You're going to learn the plays for your high school as well. So definitely don't feel bad. Don't be embarrassed because you play JV. Go out there and ball out and show those coaches what you're able to do.
Yeah, in addition to that, throwing a side note, I mean, the amount that a kid's going to grow from 14 and 15, I mean, a lot of these incoming freshmen are 14 years old, 15 years old. And to think about the growth between 14 and 15 and the time you're 18 is significant. And just to be able to get reps at that, especially at certain positions, you're better off getting reps at a quarterback. Stay down, play JV, and then you come in there as a sophomore, junior, and hit varsity. But yeah, I'm all for getting reps at that JV level, and a lot of it has to do with the coaching staff instilling excitement into the program and all that. But yeah, it's definitely part of the overall picture. But yeah, no doubt.
And it kind of goes with our societal conversations that we always have, that with our youth, attention is what they want, right? They want attention. They want attention, and that's not a fault of theirs. It's not a fault. It's so much attention to go around that why can't I have any, right? So varsity obviously gets more attention than JV. And when that happens, along with the society we live in, we have a fast food mentality. We're not really going through the process of cooking a whole meal. We want everything instantaneously. So you're not necessarily trusting the process. You want instant success. You want to be on varsity. You want that attention as a varsity player, and you're not really wanting to be patient with the process. So understanding all of that, that's just another layer about varsity and JV. But JV, junior varsity football, has to be almost a heartbeat of your program, because that is your own feeder system. It's your own feeder system. And shoot, just me and my son, we went into this with a plan of playing 2 years of junior varsity football. And he had a level of success at junior varsity. It prepared him to be a varsity player, and he had a good level of success as a varsity player directly because of the experience that he gained 2 years as a junior varsity player. So I'm a big proponent of junior varsity.
Absolutely. Obviously, JV, like you said, the attention, they're not going to have a ton of fans probably in the stands. Most people aren't going out Thursday and Friday. So like, speaking of fans, Preston, you've been to a ton of home games in Tampa, and I feel like you've been to a bunch of away games in Tampa. So in your opinion, like the Tampa fans, tell me a little bit about the fan base of Tampa.
Woo, man. Here's the crazy thing. I don't even think it is a high school thing. I think it is a Tampa Bay cultural issue for me personally. If you go to any University of South Florida football game, the stands might be a quarter full, right? If the Bucks aren't winning, the stadium is half full. The only consistent program, the freaking the Rays are good every year. Like, they're an 80-plus win team every single year, and we can't get anybody at the Trop, right? The only team that consistently packs the house is Amley with the Lightning. And that's because all the transplants that are down here from up north is why the Amley's always packed with hockey folks, right? So I think it's more so I think there's a cultural, for me, I'm going to use issue just for me personally. I see it on a week-to-week basis at every level, that if it's not a Tampa Bay Tech home game, if it's not a Plant home game, Armwood's even wishy-washy depending on the game, who the opponent that they play. If it's not or Durant's has a good home environment too. But if it's not a core group of 5 or 6 teams in Tampa Bay, the stands are empty. And that's football. If you go to basketball, they don't even roll out the other side of the gym's bleachers anymore. Like, everybody has to sit on one side because there's so few fans that are at the basketball games in Tampa Bay. It's just there's so many other things that are going on, and because we're so top heavy. If you think about it, you can name the consistently good programs on one hand. Let's go back to football. On one hand in Tampa Bay, the consistently every year you can count on them to be good. And then in basketball, if it's not a private school, you're talking about average to below average teams. So whereas they're only going to an attractive game. Think about it. When USF football was in the Big East, Raymond James was packed all the time because they were playing Big East opponents. They were playing West Virginias. They were playing Miamis. They were playing the better teams. Now with the teams on their schedule, they're playing Conference USA opponent. People in Tampa don't want to go to those games. They only go when Alabama comes to town or when Miami comes to town. So it's the same type of thing with high school. the Tech Armwood game was packed. Now let Armwood play Strawberry Crest, and you see if the same Armwood fans show up to see the Strawberry Crest game. I guarantee you it ain't gonna happen. So that's my 2 cents. I think it's a cultural thing to where we like sports when it's convenient, and if it is top competition playing each other.
So here's a couple of things that I thought about as you were talking. So Tampa is pretty spread thin. We got a lot of high schools. So, we talked about, I know Derek talks about like Mulberry and Lakeland and, these other little cities that just have their one high school, and that's everybody pretty much there's one high school to choose to go to their games, and that experience is a lot more packed. And so Tampa, being that there is a lot of schools, it is a little bit spread thin. The other thing I thought about when you were talking is whenever I was in my 20s, I did nightclub promotion. And one of my buddies said, he's like, man, Tampa is a bunch of robots. Like, all it takes is a little bit of promotion and everybody's there. And same thing with, it seems like with sports as well. All it takes is a few people to be like, that's the game of the week. It's going to be crazy. And all of a sudden it's there. And if they put that same type of promotion at a basketball game, at any type of game, like I feel that like in Tampa, when it comes to a local game, they'll show up, but there has to be that excitement there. It has to be some type of like attraction and somebody promoting it, some highlight videos, stuff like that. That's going to really draw the traffic there.
Let me jump in before Derek, because I see Derek's brain he's about to just let us both have it. I can see it in his face. But let me say this also. With that, and we talk Polk County. When you grow up in Polk or Bradenton and Manatee, you are wanting to you don't go anyplace else. If you grew up in Lakeland, you grew up in Lakeland. You weren't growing up in Lakeland and then transferring to Fort Meade. So just take this example. In Tampa, if a kid grows up in Town and Country, which is Zone 4, Zone 4 Alonzo, and they have a premier athlete in Town and Country,
they may be going to countryside.
Somebody is looking to remove that kid from Town and Country and get him to freaking Plant or Armwood. So he doesn't grow up wanting to be a Raven. He grows up like, yo, this is only a matter of time before I go be a Panther or a Hawk. And that happens all the time. Like we have all these, okay, Matt, we're not going to name names, but we're talking off camera about a prospect like, yo, this kid, they need to make sure they grab a hold of him real hard, because once his name gets out there, we'll see how long he lasts at that school, right? If this were Lakeland, it wouldn't even, or this was Auburndale or something like that, it wouldn't even be a problem. That kid, there's no way that kid's leaving Auburndale. There's no way that kid's going outside of Fort Meade. That's saying without having facts, but it is less prevalent in those type of areas than it is in the Tampa Bay area. Kids, you want to have top players playing each other in different areas versus all the top kids going to 3 schools, and that's the only 3 teams that people are going to see because that's the only player all the top players go to. If it were 4 or 5 top players at each school, if that was the case, then you have better matchups because everybody wants to see the top players, and you have to go to all the different games to see the top players instead of just 3 schools.
Yeah, the continuity that you're talking about among other counties or small town Florida. If you want to enjoy a game, I mean, the last I don't go to a lot of games just because I don't like to go out. I just don't do that. But last game I went to was Umatilla, and it was just a great environment, small town America, and everybody walking through the gates knew each other by first name. They were cooking hot dogs and hamburgers and selling them for $1. Little things like that in small town America that to me make that a much better setting. But that being said, the continuity amongst the youth ranks that you can find in Polk, you're not going to find that in Tampa, like you just said. If you're in Town and Country, hell, you may be at Leto, Alonzo, you may be across county and countryside. Hell, if you're good enough, CCC is going to come knocking at your door. You may be up on Gaither. You may be at TC. I mean, shit, you got 7 schools within a walking distance almost. And there's no true loyalty at a young age for Tampa kids. Hell, most of the kids aren't even from here. when I tell people I'm born and raised in Tampa, they look at me like I'm from another planet. They're like, "Oh, you're born and
Same,
raised in
same,
Tampa?"
same here, bro. They look at me like I'm from another
And that's
planet, dude.
changing a little bit. That's changing a little bit. But that being said, we got way too many people not from here that are here now for many reasons. But so at the pro ranks, I think what you see is you've got a lot of fickleness within our professional ranks. And quite honestly, if you're like the cost of going to a game, I'm like, no thanks. I wouldn't go to a game. Like even if you got free tickets, you got to pay to park. You got to pay to drink 3 beers. You got to pay. There's too much money. It costs so much money that people are like, I'll do something else with my money. And if you're not winning, like when Culverhouse owned the Bucks many years back, I mean, they would still draw 45,000 in a 75,000 seat stadium, but people just got sick of the ownership and they were craving a winner in the Bucks years back. And this fan base really, I mean, we had the worst owner of all of the owners of probably in sports history. And so this area was starving for football at the professional level, and that was one of the reasons on the professional side. But yeah, if you are not putting a winner out there, and the Lightning have done that, and I know the Rays have done it, but they've got to. If that was in Tampa, I think you'd have a little bit different of an atmosphere. But quite honestly, just people have better things to do. They have cheaper things to do. In baseball, I mean, 82 games a year. That's a lot of games. And so anyway, there's a lot of things going on. But you know, it's there's a lot of people living here that are not from here that don't have that loyalty at the professional rank. But the high school, I think it has to do with the continuity amongst the youth ranks. And then that just, once you get up to high school, you can be going in 5 different directions. And I think you lose, you know, some of that loyalty and passion maybe at the high school level. But
Derek sounds like he's breaking up a little bit.
Yeah.
You good?
I can't hear me.
But go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. So it's definitely it's spread too thin, you know, in certain areas, especially like baseball. You know, like imagine like you have the Yankees playing the Rays. You know, that sounds exciting, but there's 5 games that week, so it's like, how do you, instead of having just like one big game where everybody goes to, it's so spread thin, and then with all the schools in Tampa, it's super spread thin. You can't just get that many fans everywhere. So unless it's a big game and there's a lot on the line, you're not going to really have a lot of, and that's at the local level. You know, now when you're talking about traveling, the fans to travel, you know, Tampa fans aren't driving. It seems like more than 30 minutes away, give or take. Like they don't go to Trop. They're not gonna, you know, you don't really get a big fan base. Like if, for example, like Tech go down to Venice, you know, that's a great game, you know, but you're probably only going to have like the parents and a couple of friends that are going to come. It's not going to be super sold out. When Armwood went down to Miami Norland, you know, that's another incredible game, but you're not going to get these Tampa fans really out of Tampa. Tampa's kind of its own little island over here. They don't even go to St. Pete area. So
right. St. Pete comes to Tampa all the time, but telling Tampa folks, like, I ain't going to St.
Especially, you know, they have a couple of beers and they're like, oh man, at the professional level, you know, that was been like when I asked my friends, like, why don't you go, you know, to any Rays games? And that's their answer was like, oh man, you have 2 or 3 beers and you got to try to drive back now. And so the Tampa fans don't really like to travel very far.
I give one other small little percentage, and it is another little layer to his argument, are legacy kids. All right. So, you know, you can start naming some of these high schools around here, the older high schools, your Plants, your Hillsboroughs, you know, your Tampa Techs, your Chamberlains. You start naming some of these older high schools. Well, and this goes into your travel argument. If let me give a better example. If Chamberlain were to have to travel to Lakeland for a game, right? You can see if that school was as populated as it used to be, you would get a lot more attention because those parents who would be driving those high school kids to those games, they also used to attend Chamberlain. So now they're not just going to drive and drop off and then come back home. No, they're going to go drop off. They're going to go attend the game with those kids because they went to Chamberlain also. So they're supporting their school because they're legacy kids, which is why Plant travels so well. A lot of those kids who go are in South Tampa. Their parents went to Plant. They're in South Tampa. Tech is like that big time. It's a lot of legacy kids who attend Tech and Hillsborough. So those you can see those kind of teams that travel better and have a larger fan base is because they have a lineage of people who have gone through that same high school. So they're if they have to travel down to Venice, Tech's going to travel very well down to Venice because the parents in the stands also went to Tech. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of times parents just ain't going to drive an out like Alonzo to Durant, maybe the furthest game ever. There's no legacy kids that go to Alonzo Plant. Like both of those schools might be 20 years old. So going to take kids over to Durant, if they're not driving themselves, there's no way for them to get there.
Yeah, that's like an hour and a half drive. Almost. I mean, I went to Gaither, and I live in Brandon, which is still like 20 minutes from Durant, I feel like. Last time I drove, a good 15, 20 minutes. So, and it was an hour to Gaither. So that's a good hour and 20-minute drive. Like I think
absolutely
20, 30 minutes is the max for these Tampa fans. They're not going.
I get pissed if I got to drive 5 minutes to the grocery store. Man,
I know. I got a good topic. That make sure that we bring this up. What makes a good rivalry? And I don't just think it's who wins and who loses. All right, so we make sure we'll mark that down as a good conversation point for next time. So, hey, any last thoughts, you guys?
Yeah, fans, get out there and support those high schools. Those coaches are doing a lot to develop these programs, and you got to go check it out, man, because you're going to see these kids. A lot of great kids from Tampa are going to college, and then there's also a lot of kids now from college going to NFL. So make sure you see these kids before they make it to NFL in high school. It's pretty cool to watch, and the development as they grow. So make sure you guys get out there and support your high school teams.
Good deal.
Yeah, everybody who's rocking on, keep rocking on. You teams who are kind of climbing this chart, left over right, keep doing your Strawberry Crest, your Leonards. Hey, keep doing what you're doing. We are paying attention. Yeah. So
Plant City has been doing great this year. I mean, there's a lot of teams that just are coming up. They're really, really doing awesome. It's fun to go to these games as well, and it's not expensive. $5 gets you in the game. You might spend $15 at the concession, $20, man. You go to an awesome game, and they're pretty exciting. You'd be surprised. They do a great job at home. The kids are running out of tunnels, and they got smoke machines, and it's a good time for sure.
Hey, any other small town? Any other of the teams in the area that want to be featured on the social media platforms of all of us? Just hit us up with game film only. We're not looking at highlights. Get us over the game film, and we'll get you featured and get you talked about on here.
Yes, sir.
Yep,
we're out.
Guys, take care.